Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to another episode of Let's Talk podcast. I'm your host, Saurabh Gupta, and today we have a pretty interesting discussion lined up about a topic which impacts every industry, every organization, and frankly, all of us in our daily lives. In a world where we are much more interconnected than ever, innovations really thrive when we have a collaboration. And as the boundaries blur, we just need some kind of a robust security in terms of the technology, and it becomes much more critical. And today, as we explore these topic, it would be a very delicate combination, compilation, or I would say dance between the innovation and collaboration, and how sometimes security deemed often like it imposes some of the stringent challenges around that. And the dynamics becomes much more intriguing when we throw AI into the mix. So let me just quickly start with a story, which I always try to put in to make some thought process growing. So a few years back, a multinational organization launched an AI powered platform designed to bring teams together across the globe. Engineers in India collaborated with marketers in the US and the designers in the Europe, all in the real time, sharing their ideas and iterating on projects, a pretty faster speed. But here's the twist: halfway through, the security breach uh, occurred in their organization, and an external actor exploited some one of the vulnerability, and the data which they thought so would be pretty much I would say classified and labeled or protected in a simple English was exposed. And obviously everyone knows that what would have happened. The backlash was immediate from regulators, from the overall the way how the company is projected, and their own employees. The project was paused, the trust was eroded, and obviously the tail becomes cautionary, which otherwise would be a symbol of innovation. So these stories highlight some of the critical questions which we are tackling today, while we also have to have some openness and collaboration. And this is one of the life skills which we always discuss. But how do we have a striking balance between the security and openness? And this is something which we are going to discuss today with our esteemed guest, and I think now becoming one of my friend, because he's been there for a while in Let's Talk podcast, and I'm very grateful. So Kumaran Anandan, thank you so much again for joining today, and I hope the thing which I just mentioned resonated. And thank you so much for coming on this show today.
Thanks, Saurabh. I like the promotion to near friend because now when I visit Florida, I have a place to stay.
Absolutely. If you're coming to Florida, if you're coming to Disney, or even wherever, I can drive and come and meet you. And if I be in India, I'll try to make a plan to come to Chennai.
Yeah, good. So
Okay. Yes, please go ahead.
I was an interesting thing. Like one of the recent inspirations to me, for a lot of different perspectives, is a company called Zerodha.
Mhm.
Not sure how many people would have heard of it. It is one of the most popular online trading applications. Mutual funds, options, equities, commodities, all sorts of
How
stuff.
do you spell that?
Zerodha. Z
Oh,
Z
zero,
E
Zero, and
T
DA,
H A.
THA.
Yodha.
Okay, got it, got it.
Okay. So I can go on and on, but let me tell you a few key points. Number one, they have zero sales and marketing team. Okay. And their operations, they do operations of close to 20 or 25,000 crores.
Hmm.
Okay. They don't offer any discount, no freemium service, no freebies. From day one, it is paid. Okay.
Mhm.
Third, They are 80% remote, working in such a critical thing, which means people work from their homes. Uh, I mean, think of a financial institution who is at this level, right? For all these things to happen, and for an online thing, they should have got the technology strategy right. Otherwise, they couldn't execute this.
Hmm.
Okay. And all the tick boxes of collaboration, security, innovation, everything is ticked. And they were one of the first guys who you could actually onboard yourself onto a trading application without visiting the branch or submitting a physical paper. Even today, there are large banks like IBA, ICICI, SBI. You have to give a physical paper for you to complete, open an account. Okay, so strategy, are they innovative? Tick mark. Are whether in providing the solution. If a company has to sell without any sales, literally zero sales and marketing budget, obviously tick mark, very innovative. Um, Being a technology company, I mean, financial company with so much of regulations and risks and things like that, they are able to have 80% of their staff work from home. Security tick mark, flexibility tick. Um, yeah, and the features wise, quite a bit of them. So unfortunately, I've never had a chance to talk to the CTO. I'm trying to talk to him. It's a very interesting person called Kailash Nath. And the founders are also pretty interesting. They are kind of celebrity status kind of people. Um, I would like to, I mean, the reason I'm just making that observation is I'm starting off with a note that there are, okay, there is one organization which I have for sure has done all the things right.
Mm.
Okay.
So that's a good way to start. So let me get to the bottom of. I think two things which really strikes. One is they are doing something which is unconventional in terms of there is no sales and marketing, and still they are successful. And the other thing is, it seems that their strategy is pretty strong, and they know uh, if their product is strong enough, or they have really done a lot of work to understand what the end client or end user really want. In that way, they don't need any persuasion or any kind of conversations to showcase the value. So the question is, let's start with the fundamentals. What do you think about strategy? I mean, strategy word is being used everywhere,
Hmm.
and sometimes people have they start with the right word and diction and intention, but they fall into the cracks of planning or execution. What do you think? Like how you kind of think strategy should be looks like? Yeah.
Um, I was, I had a very wrong understanding of strategy until a week ago.
Hmm.
I thought when people talk about strategy, they are talking about something which will give them a unique advantage or something very different, special. Uh, but the dictionary definition of that is different. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong or others are wrong, but I just expose my ignorance that I thought strategy was something like a special competitive advantage that you're developing to make yourself unique, which your competition or others won't do. But turns out that the absolute or the dictionary definition is actually what having a detailed plan for achieving success in something which is long term in nature. Okay, so
Hmm.
it's a more it's a big plan, okay, over a long term kind of a plan that is there. Now if that is the and I and to me strategy necessarily also have to, because if I'm just going to take that thing, to me it looks like bare or bare minimal survival, not something which is aiming to hit the ball out of the park. So if there is some other uh, word, or just say strategic, will also have that thing that it is going to make me not just execute what I had in mind, but it is about something which is also going to make me unique. Now, we don't need to get stuck onto the word, okay, but I think people need to be clear in their head that when they say strategy, what are they talking about and what the team is talking about.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And in large companies where I have worked with, I've heard this thing. Oh, tomorrow we are having our monthly review. Let's come up with a strategy to handle the questions.
mm.
I'm mind blown. You want a strategy to answer questions on your project review? Okay. Then what is tactics?
Yes, yes. I think, yeah, yeah. I think this is a human nature to get into, fall into those way of using technical jargons and using heavy words to solidify their thought process. But I think it's a fallacy to understand that part, because the more simplification you can provide in your communication, it shows two things. One, it's easy to communicate and make people understand. The other one is to showcase that how much you already have spent time on this. Otherwise, you can go on a monologue, which we normally see in a lot of in setting, without meetings have any outcomes. So
Yeah.
great, great. I think we can, and I think it seems like Deepak may be joining in a while, shortly.
Okay.
Let's get into the crux of the communication. Okay, so I think Deepak is here as well. So let me just introduce Deepak here. Deepak is here as well. Welcome, Deepak. Thank you so much for joining. You're on mute. I think, yeah, you are still on mute. Maybe you have to figure out maybe on the browser. No, we cannot hear you. We cannot hear you.
It's showing us mute.
Yes. Let me see if I can.
I think you should hear me now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect, perfect, perfect.
Okay.
So, Deepak, thank you so much for joining here. I'm sorry if you haven't got the invite, or maybe it's in a different name.
Yeah. Well, somehow I lost the invite. It was not in my Google.
Okay, okay. So that's perfectly fine. So I'll just maybe give you some of a warm up while we are having conversations around the innovation and security at the same time. And we were discussing about some of the strategy of how strategy plays an important part. So one of the things which we were discussing, and maybe Kumaran, you can proceed in your flow of thoughts, and then we can get Deepak in that way as well. About let's talk about some of the things is when we talk about innovation, what are the key things we should be looking at when we always say that, oh, it has to be secure as well, whether it's a software development lifecycle management, whether it's a architecture and all, which is not something conventionally people have done it, because security, at least uh, decade and a half or 2 decades back, was only confined to firewalls and network devices. So maybe Kumran, if you can start, what's your, I mean, if someone asks you, what's your take on that?
I think so. Let's, in today's world, right? I think
Mhm.
probably for the past, I would say very strongly in the past 5 to 6 years. Okay. I have been outside the Microsoft and the enterprise space. I do have some enterprise customers, but I do work with a lot of startups and
Mhm.
small things, right? And I find that any company which is a little more than 50 to 60 people, okay, in terms of size and business, they mature to implement secure processes. Okay. And one of the key things that I see is purely from a tech perspective, right?
Hmm.
Simple things like, let me um, install something new, right? Get something new. Let and today, when you say collaboration, right? I think one of the key things is about API integration. Now, I the kind of freedom that I have, right, in making few things, putting a product together, connecting few different things, and then see how it works, having access to that, that is severely stifled in these companies. Okay, I'll give two simple examples. If you've done Python, you do a pip install to get a package. You are inside a company, you can't do pip install.
Hmm.
Without pip install, what will you do in Python?
Mm.
Okay, you can't do an n-get. Okay. Uh, then, like, let's say we want to do, for example, I want to try a new Visual Studio add-on for Coded. Okay. It's going to make an API call. The Visual Studio add-in is going to make an API call. I can't use that. I have Visual Studio VS Code, but it will have one very ordinary extension to it. Okay. Uh, Now we are adding more to that with Gen AI and stuff, how much we can try, what we can do, what we cannot do. So it's, I think, see, previously we didn't have that much opportunities. Now I see that, uh, okay, I'll just finish this and I'll let others comment, right?
Hmm.
For somebody who's homeless and out on the street, no, okay, they don't have to fast. They are already having intermittent fasting, is what they are doing. Okay, but
Yeah.
when you are in a, uh, festival or a function or a wedding, at that time fasting becomes necessary.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the thing here, right? In and this is I'm comparing time periods. 5 6 years ago, there was not so much of innovation opportunity around, right? In terms of tools and stuff like that. Today, uh, you can actually develop a basic functioning website without knowing one line of code. Now, how much is it going to be production? You can't, but at least you can do a prototype if you just have common sense. This was not available 3 years ago, or
Yeah.
even 2 years ago for that matter, right?
Yeah.
Now, that's a huge innovation opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
Like, my wife, who's not been in coding for a long time, she's trying to help people change careers. Now she's kind of able to put a functional site together, and she hasn't touched the keyboard or coded for the past 20 years. She has absolutely no clue about Python or GitHub or things like that. She's able to make a prototype, she's able to show it, she's able to test it, right? So it is like moving from idea to something. That's the feast that I'm talking about. Okay,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
opportunity to eat, it's huge now. Okay.
And
Previously, you were always homeless, so it's okay. Not that much opportunity was there. Security was fine. Okay, but now all these are so much of lost opportunities.
yes, yes, and I think, and before I get to Deepak, I think you are one of the thing which you mentioned, which really emphasizes that we have a lot of options, and at the same time, it's a kind of a paradox of choice. There's a book which shows that the more choices we have, the more paralysis of the decision making we have as well. So this is the other side of the spectrum, but that's a good analogy of the homeless person. I'll come to Deepak here and provide. Deepak, I mean, you can start maybe just a bit of an introduction because you're the first time in our podcast, and then get into like what's your thought about when we are trying to innovate, but at the same time we talk about security.
Sure. So let me introduce myself. I've been with Microsoft a very, very long time. I've been in different roles. So
Mhm.
presently, I'm an architect in the industry solutions delivery, and I work on adoption, change, and service management side of the delivery. And I deal with security as a as a concept, as a from
Oh, I lost you. Is
Yeah,
it
your
me or
voice.
yeah,
No,
your
no,
voice?
yeah, voice.
Is it? Yeah, no, we cannot hear you. Uh,
I think it went on mute again.
yeah, just check and if you're working on multiple
no, it's
browsers, yeah.
no,
Okay.
I think it just it's just like I don't know why it went on mute. Okay,
Yeah, now
so
it's
let
fine.
Okay,
me
go
Yeah.
ahead. Please go ahead. Yes, I think now we're good. Yeah.
okay, let me start with the introduction again. So
Yes.
I've been with Microsoft for a very long time, and in the mostly in the services side of business, and I presently work on adoption, change, and service management with all Microsoft technologies, including our security stack and how it gets implemented across.
Yeah, I think something is going in his against his Deepak, I don't know. Maybe you want to join back again or just close all the browser. Sometimes some of the other browser related activities
It's on, yeah, and it went
block it
on
as
mute.
well. So, anyways, while we are working with Deepak, yeah. I think this is a good conversations around like the security. And one of the things which I always mention is there's always a constant tussle between oh we are trying to innovate, but how do we exactly know where and how much security we have to put in, like what is the structure, and then obviously it comes like if you're developing a whole website or a security development lifecycle management you may have to look into, or if you already like kind of low code or no code applications, then go through some of the best practices either by the vendors or what are the key changes to look from the security side. I mean, I don't want to get into the deep, but how exactly you collaborate, or if people are like in the constant phase or in the confusion, what are some of the things which you can mention them to clarify, like what are those questions they should be asking to ensure that they are on the right path to find their own answers in terms of innovation and security collaboration.
I think it at a very fundamental level, if I'm just comparing rather than
Hmm.
hypo, hypothesizing, right? The startups or the small companies, they have a fairly clear vision of what they need to do, and they also have a lack of resources,
Hmm.
which kind of facilitates them uh, being open. So maybe it's the poor man's case where they don't have enough money to spend on security, so they are open. It could be that.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, Rather than out of choice, out of necessity, they are more open. But one thing is they have lot more ideas to go after. So they try a lot of things and they secure, and it's like a virtuous cycle, right? You explore a little, you get more, you get little more, you get exposed. So it's like you can go expand yourself. You didn't have the first step, you can't install Python, end of story, game over,
Yeah.
right? So that's a tough part. I think you would have seen large enterprises in security in this thing from where what you have seen, right? um, there'll be a lot different kind of companies that you have seen, but have you seen, it will be difficult to say one company which got it right, but at least you might have seen some group or some department, right, have been able to make it happen. Now
Hmm.
if you double click that and see, there will be one guy who's very clear or one person who was able to make it happen. um, can you recall anything like that? Anybody which kind of say, huh,
Sure.
interesting. Oh, this is how they did it. Cool.
I think in day to day, I have done a lot of conversations around being a spoiler in terms of when there's so much of motivation. I said, "Oh, it's not secure. So what? Oh, we have
Oh,
to
you are
build.
the wet blanket.
Obviously, I mean, back in the day, I was a person, a messenger who always provide bad news or try to pick. I mean, they're like, oh, I mean, I have my own. Go back home, and my wife is just pointing my some of the challenges and things. Oh, you don't do this or that. Now in professional world, you guys are coming and providing. So again, jokes
Mm,
apart,
yeah.
um, we do have seen certain circumstances where there is a excitement, there's energy, but they forget about having how do we secure by default to ensure that. And one of the things which I always mention is in the view of going through plethora of options where you again get into the paradox of choices, or your mind is so much of clouded with so much of options where to start. It's always like the first step starts with completing your marathon. So we just want to make sure that what are your business key goals and KPIs. And for example, like if you are running an e-commerce website, then in that website, what exactly that requires to keep that website running if you build it up, or if you are like having an ongoing small scale organization, what happens if your whole website goes down today evening? Is that the first thing you want to bring it up? If the answer is yes, so let's focus on that website and see how exactly you are taking that website. What is the front end, back end, database, security? How exactly we can try to bring all those things together to ensure that you can create a prototype and working with those key business drivers which makes your organization looks good or terribly bad in front of the world. And we can take that approach to take one step of a decision before overthinking and then trying to go everywhere without making much movement. So in that way, we can try to work on your website, and in that website, what are those security controls you have measured? Who is going to access the database? What happens your security in depth if something falls or fell through on that? And then what is the second level of defense? Those are some of the things, because one of the things I always believe personally is it's not about the right answers, it's about the right questions. Have you asked the people to right questions to think about? Because there are a lot of people to give you all the right answers, but if those right answers do not resonate to your actual requirements, then what's the use of it? So you have to really come back and helping the decision makers to ensure that whatever they are innovating, what the end goal looks like, which comes back to the strategy we were discussing. And then from there, we have to take the step of what is your key outcome and drivers. And based on those success, we can then try to replicate in other initiatives as well. So this is something which I would try to go and take as a foundational to ensure that we marry the innovation and the security and make a strong case, not only to them, but to the board of directors and other people who are involved to be more confident in working together and not taking or thinking security as a deterrent to their innovation process.
Hmm. Uh, I think that works. That makes sense when you have a particular business area or a thing identified, then you go focused around that.
Hmm.
But no, and one of the biggest challenges is in innovation, right?
Yeah.
If you go, most of the companies, enterprises, innovation is left to the innovation team.
Mhm.
Okay, I hear that response. Okay, and I think it's extremely hard for an innovation team to come up with something innovative. Let me give you an example. If you look at the key inventions, the key innovations that happens, the person who did it felt where the shoe pinches. You take most of the innovations, that person who drove the innovation would be at the receiving end of the innovation which didn't happen there in
Mhm.
some way or the other. Now, that is what I will give a concept of something called a worm's view. Everybody would have heard of a bird's view.
Mhm.
Okay. But there is a person in the innovation space, I do not recall her name now. She introduced me to the word called worm's view. Okay. Now, as much as strategy is very important, a strategy without a worm's view will be so disconnected from reality. It is what we call LLMs do called hallucination.
Hmm.
Okay, so you need to have a worm's view, and that worm's view needs to validate your strategy. It's not that, oh, I'll make a strategy, eventually I'll go land down. And wherever you land, oh, this is where I landed. This is what happens. This is exactly where I wanted to come. Okay.
Mhm.
And then you say, this place is not exactly that good. Let's go back up and then come down again.
Yeah.
New strategy.
Yeah.
Okay. Because the worm's view doesn't exist.
Hmm.
Or the ones who are putting that strategy or executing it do not have a worm's view. Okay. And that's why innovation teams struggle. What is a worm's view? A worm's view, let's take the most popular innovation example which has been beaten to death in any disruption, innovation, startup world.
Mhm.
It's called Uber. They've beaten it to death as a case study. Okay. But if you know the story, Kalanick was stuck in traffic on a rainy day in Paris trying to wave a cab. He did not see a cab. He saw hundreds of cabs and he was doing the wave dance. He couldn't get a cab. Uber happened.
Hmm.
That is a worm's view. It is not like, oh, let's disrupt the transportation industry and then we will make all taxi go out of the way and I have this plan to go execute it. No, it didn't
Hmm.
happen like
Yes. Yes. I think you're right in that perspective that while innovation is required, uh, it has to
oh, sorry.
be.
I was just so
Yes.
what I was trying to drive with this, right? We
Hmm.
talk about local innovation, which means every department, right?
Hmm.
So, for example, the innovation needed by a sales team in India will be very different from the innovation needed by a sales team in Japan or a sales team in US. And who is the best person to do? Somebody who's meeting Indian customers, somebody who's meeting Japanese customers, and somebody who's meeting US customers.
Hmm.
How can a central innovation team figure out what the sales guy is getting thrown at?
Hmm.
So
Yes.
that means local innovation has to happen, which
Oh,
means
yeah. Definitely.
they have to be enabled with tools.
Hmm.
Now, classically, what happens is the innovation team has access to all the tools. They are given free hand. And this, I think, is, I don't have an answer, but the question is the local teams needs to be able to innovate. How is somebody going to enable it for them?
So how you add this to the innovation securely with this openness what we are discussing? Uh, what's your view on that? Like now we are trying to innovate, and maybe we have to work with some people across the ocean. How exactly that comes into the picture? While they have
Ah,
figured out, they're all pumped up, but how they want to make it secure? What's your take on that?
uh, so there is, okay. So even in this case, right? Like,
Hmm.
let's say, uh, let me take was working with a bank, okay, and currently, and then we go to the one of the branches, which is Vijayawada, which is a B town,
Hmm.
a B level town in Andhra, and then we go to the branch, and then I asked them. They spend around 10 days, 10 minutes every day doing a
Hmm.
particular task. Okay, and this is a person who is on the floor there telling it,
Hmm.
and that bank has got only one computer which has power automate on it. The rest of the computers are like a local LAN connected to the local server.
Hmm.
They are only connected to the core banking system. Okay. So we found a case where A lot of people are doing stuff, but the access to Power Automate and Teams is only on one computer. It's not a very large bank. It's a small bank. Okay.
Mhm.
But the person there came up with a very nice use case where they can actually save 10 minutes. And that branch has got 4 employees, from including the manager. That is
Mhm.
40 minutes a day for a small branch. Now, one computer is going to be the bottleneck for them. So what do? They have to do all that stuff in manual, okay? And they actually have a, I don't know whether you guys know, there's something called IP message which used to exist. If you have used it, it has a blue and a red icon. It used to be the instant messaging thing in 2000s,
Mhm.
okay? That's what they are using to send files and across their computers today in their office.
Wow.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah. So they do an Excel and then they sort it. They don't do file share for whatever reason. And now, okay, so the two parts to the story. One, it is only that person working in that branch. In half an hour, I was able to identify that use case, which actually made a difference. It's very hard for somebody else from outside to figure that out because the person on the floor knows it. That's a worm's view. Now, the second part is whatever they are able to do, now they should be able to transfer it to the other branches. Okay. How are they going to do that? Okay, they did it. Now, uh, let's say okay, so in this case, it's not that complicated because um, at least Power Automate specifically, if you say you can export the solution,
Yeah.
send it over Teams to the next branch, and then they can import it and take it. Okay. But the case is something like, let's say they did a local solution running a script or a batch job like that. They wouldn't be able to send that same thing to the other branch. Now, imagine the other branch has to sit and write the same PowerShell script or a Windows script to get their job done. Or forget that. No big deal. Excel macro.
Yeah.
An Excel which they did with that local branch did an innovation. One branch cannot send an Excel to another branch. Where is collaboration? Where is joint innovation?
Yeah. Yeah. I
I'm not
think.
talking about hi-fi $1 million innovation and all. I'm talking about simple ground level innovation which actually matters.
Yes.
It gets
Yes.
actually frustrating, you know. It's like you can see that opportunity right in front, right? And uh, so somebody has to ask this question, right? How much of innovation opportunity are we actually losing by doing something like this? I know Deepak has something to
Yeah.
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 add.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, you see, I was talking to one of the CISOs because since we're talking about security and innovation,
Yeah.
and so he said, and this is a statement which I remember because this should be a sort of a lesson to all the other
Uh,
CISOs. I'm
when you say
Yeah,
CISO, is it strategy officer or security officer?
security
Security.
officer. That's the most
That,
common.
Okay.
The chief
Okay.
information security officer.
Oh,
That's
chief
it.
security.
information
That's
security.
it.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
that's it.
Okay.
So I mean that's the in the security world that is commonly understood
Okay.
terminology. That's why I used it,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. Okay.
And the statement which he made, which I still remember, and he says, "I am not in the in the business of securing the organization. I am in the risk business. My job is to figure out how much risk the company can take safely.
Hmm.
It's not that I can secure everything 100%. My job is to figure out how much risk we can take without going bankrupt or without going completely bonkers, right? So that's that. And if I think if all CISOs start thinking like that, you won't have situation like this where it's such a
Uh,
lockdown environment where it says we are totally so much risk averse that we will block all innovation, right?
Yeah.
So that's the from the strategy perspective, I think that's the role the security should be playing. He says your job in the whole scenario is figure out how much risk can you
uh,
actually afford let the company to take and and still be surviving
right? So it's not about that you can secure everything, right? It's never about that you can prevent all 100% of the attacks. It is about your survivability in an environment, how quickly you can recover, right? So you remember the whole defense in depth and assume breach and all those things, right? So all these things come from, again, risk management. This is
Yeah.
because you have to assume that you already breached, and how do you prevent things from going bad, right? So if now the whole citadel approach, which you saw in that bank, right, is like we are the fortress and we want to prevent everything from ever getting into anywhere. I don't think that works anymore. And the people who are following that approach, in fact, one of the, I will not take the name, the bank which we are trying to try to get them on Copilot, and they are saying, I want to figure out how this packet goes from here to there and what comes from here to there, and so he wants to get into the space where he is risking getting behind all the other banks in the industry who are going to adopt this and lose out on innovation, right? So, of course, Microsoft will try and answer all the questions which they have, but given the amount of due diligence, unnecessary due diligence, I would say, they are
Mm.
applying. Some of it is necessary. I would not say that they'd say, okay, you ask Microsoft to prove that it is secure enough for my environment. And beyond a point, it becomes completely unnecessary nitpicking to my
Yeah.
mind.
I actually, you got few good points here, and I think I just want to re-emphasize and paraphrase. Is about there are so many things going on through executive mind, and as you rightly mentioned, that it's all about risk management. And this is something which is not something very new. I always try to relate everything to a common life because that's much of the easier thing in any sort or any walks of life. If you try to make some decisions, it's always a kind of a risk management only, how much risk you're taking. So the thing is, what's indifferent in the professional world? Obviously, it's not you, it's a lot of people around you. And and in considering that, when people get into the rabbit hole of what you mentioned, Deepak, about packet level inspections and all those things, and uh, then I would always try to just reflect and take a pause and always like, what exactly the outcome we are trying to achieve? What is the business goals which we discuss? Again, I think we lost Deepak here again. So, like we discussed, Kumaran, before as well, that what exactly we're discussing. So, again, coming back to the point, we can go on and on just to kind of give some direction back again. Is we are talking about innovations, we are talking about security, we are also talking about how people are trying to look into these things in a different aspects, and how we can bring back then what exactly they are trying to achieve, so that we can bring give the right answer instead of giving the answer everything under the sun. The interesting mix which we are leading here today is the AI. With the advent of AI, and it's a rush through all the organizations to adopt AI. It's a kind of a FOMO as well, that, oh, it should not be like I missed out this opportunity. What's your take on how to get into the bandwagon of AI, but at the same time be very cognizant of your strategy, and not like because your competitors are going through AI, you are lagging behind. So you are just jumping in without having a right strategy in mind.
Uh, 2 years down the line, what I see is that um, the mad rush is not there. Okay. And in terms of usage and applying, it's still very much lagging. And I'll give you some data from what I have seen among the corporate customers and the senior professionals who are there. They talk about we need to have Gen AI, we need to make it work, and this happen. And I ask them a question: have you subscribed for Chat GPT Plus? We're paying $20 a month.
Hmm.
More than 96% of them say no, we haven't, which means they don't see value for Gen AI. So there's no mad rush happening there.
Okay.
Okay.
A good question.
Okay. I mean, you can test it for yourself. Just go across when you meet senior folks and say, have you subscribed for Chat GPT Plus?
Hmm.
Now, if somebody who talks about $1 billion innovation, $1 million innovation with GenAI, and they
Ah,
are not personally motivated to spend $20 a month for,
mm,
and they do not know how to get value out of $20 for the work at a senior level position, if someone is there, and they do not know how do I do not know how to get ROI for $20 a month, you know where the technology and their understanding of technology is. Okay.
mm.
Uh, that being said, so there is no worms view there. It just shows that there's no worms view.
Oh, yes,
Okay.
yes, 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 yes. I would. I think what you mentioned is pretty much on point. That what's your vision and how you are telling people, and this is, I think, the for the people who are listening to and viewing this, if they are part of this whole brainstorming sessions, or even if they are coaches, I think that's the way they have to realize how to unearth those questions or those revelations. As you mentioned, that they are talking about millions and billions of dollars of Gen AI project, but they haven't seen the true value yet, which means that they haven't created a good perspective. And without having a clear, good perspective, you cannot ask good questions. And if you do not ask
Correct.
good
Yeah.
questions, you can get the answers which are cookie cutter. And if you get the answer for the cookie cutter, you see that you are getting the same thing for everyone, which is enable Gen AI, enable Gen AI. Why, how, what's the value, which is again going circling back to our conversations about some of the things which you mentioned about Uber, of about the first organization you mentioned. That strong strategy is very important. I wrote one thing in my LinkedIn, an article as well, that strategy is very tough. As a human, we are jumping into execution because that's where the comfort level lies. If you are an executive, you gravitated towards talking those conversations and those discussions where you have a strong. If you are a developer, you try to ask more questions on development because that showcases that you have some intelligent questions. And that is the way we have to cultivate ourselves, is not asking those questions always what we are comfortable, but asking the questions which is pertinent to the situation of these organizations. And strategy is something which we have to really work on the AI side. So coming back to Gen AI, as you mentioned that the Chat GPT, this is one of the good way of triggering some thoughts, or oh yes, I think that makes a point what Kumaran mentioned. What other things they have to look into in order to make sure that there's a right balance between the AI or Gen AI and innovation with securing the things what they are doing.
I think, see, it's like I would say Gen AI is truly like cycling or
Mhm.
swimming. You can read 1,000 books for 100 years. You will
Yes.
still have no clue what cycling or swimming is unless you get into the water and you swim or you cycle. You're not going to get the balance. You're not going to learn how to float. Gen AI is something like that. Other technologies, you didn't have that problem.
Hmm.
Okay, because it's deterministic. You write a query, you'll get an answer.
Hmm.
Gen AI is not that. You have to have your own experience of what Gen AI is. I think that becomes a very key thing. And if you don't, you're going to operate on hearsay. Oh,
Yeah.
somebody said Power BI. Let's do business intelligence. Okay. You can go ahead. There is so, I can, billions of dollars have been spent on business intelligence without it being anywhere close to intelligent.
Hmm.
Billions of dollars. I have personally spent or have been a party to the crime of spent at least $300 million on projects which didn't say day, which didn't have any practical use to it. Okay, this will continue to happen. Okay, we
Hmm.
have a new technology, somebody will put, or a new CIO comes or something, they have to get a new project. Who's the newest kid on the block? A Cobra has got released. Okay, so let's build a product with Cobra. Cobra's from school. Okay. And they'll present to the board and then they will get it done. But I think one safety guard that they had is the technology till now could do only so much. They
Mm.
couldn't harm you. At best, they won't give you a return, but they won't take away your food.
Yeah.
Gen AI can do that.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
it can do something which you didn't intend it to do. Okay. So what is the response to that? Don't do it. The safest way not to miss a shot is not to take the shot.
Yes.
Okay,
But this is
so
not that
therefore,
easy, right? Yeah. I mean, for
no,
the
it's,
people. Yeah. Mm.
I think that's what is actually happening.
Yeah.
For most of the Gen AI projects, you say, oh, it's hallucinates. We don't want to take risks. Okay, this is a HR application, which is answer questions on policy.
Mm.
As if all HR people give right answers to us.
Mm.
When have we got a right answer from a HR department? Unconditional, very unambiguous, clear directive was, hey Kumaran, hey Saurabh, do this. You will get your pay slip or your tax will get work, or this is how you take a leave. When did
Yeah.
we ever get a response like that from the finance department or HR department? It
Yeah.
was always vague. Okay, and this is for internal employees. And then you say, why don't you do Gen AI? No, we have to be careful. HR policy, very sensitive thing. We can't do Gen AI unless we can get full predictability in that. That Gen AI project is not going anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And
so I think in the previous thing, right, the harm that could happen with the technology was not that high. Now with
mm,
Gen AI, the risk has increased highly. So it's like a, well, you look at it that way, yes, that is definitely true. But
mhm.
it's like you in somebody is sneaking in and sneaking out.
That's I have a bad
Yeah.
technology situation here today.
Okay. So
Yeah.
um so so the thing is actually when the corporate scenario, right? It's like a high risk, high return. Gen A is like that, right? Do you
Mm.
want to do equity or you want to do FD?
Mm.
Government bonds and securities. Safe government, do government bond and security. So let us wait for the day where we will get 100% predictability with Gen A. Okay. Now this is what I actually see in most of the cases that's happened. The mindset to go with that of how much you're open to what risk, right? In rather than telling I want a fully secure system versus how much risk, that muzzle, as Deepak was telling some time back, right? That muzzle is being seriously tested, and the results show that corporates have very weak muscle. They have to build that muscle. It is very
Exactly.
weak, evident.
Yes. Yes. So I think now Deepak is online, so quickly pivot to him. We were discussing about the Gen AI and security overall with the innovation and the risk appetite. What organizations have. What's your perspective of the AI
Let me,
mentioned
yeah,
on that? Yeah,
yeah.
please.
I was part of the discussion. I just lost maybe 2 3 minutes
Yes.
of it
Yes.
before,
Yeah.
but I was hearing it. So let me give you an example of uh, traditionally something which you would consider to be a very conservative organization who has gone all out uh, on uh, on on AI, and
Mm.
that is the government of Singapore. Right? Government of Singapore has taken a strategic bet that AI is their future, and they are investing so heavily in making sure that all their employees understand AI and they are able to use AI across the board. Right? So all the knowledge workers, right?
Mm.
So whoever sits with the computer, basically, I'm considering as a knowledge worker, they are equipped to handle AI, right? They know it is not perfect, right? They know it will not result always in this the right answer. What they want to do is they want to prepare their, and I asked it casually, asked one of the employees, says, why is it that Singapore government is investing so much? He says, see, we are a small country, we have only this much population, so we have to have this strategic leverage, because they see it as a force multiplier in that sense, right?
Mm.
That if you don't have enough people, then how will you get that strategic advantage? That's one example, extreme example of where people have, usually governments are the last to to take up technology, right? Another manufacturing organization, which I cannot name right now, but they and I went and did a session with them on adopting some of the technologies. And the CIO actually wanted to intervene for 5 minutes in my session and say, I want to talk to these people and tell them why we are taking this bet, right? And he said exactly what I said, that we know this is not perfect,
Hmm.
right? And we know it is not yet going to cover everything which we need, but we want you to be there, right? So they see this as a strategic advantage for them. If we get our people on this, we are prepared for the next level. And it's not a some small time organization, which is a big, large manufacturing infrastructure organization which has hundreds and thousands of employees. So they have gone for a pilot, right? Even in a pilot,
Mhm.
they're like maybe 4 or 5 thousand users, right? And they had like 300 people in an auditorium to get this message across, right? So I'm giving examples across that there
Where they are.
is where people are taking it seriously. They are thinking this is the the advantage, and they are putting enough resources behind it. And I'll give you another sort of extreme example, which is a technology company, right? So this is a technology company, say, and we start talking about adoption, and this is kind of effort, because our belief is that you need to make specific and concerted effort to adopt anything, right? It's not just that you switch it on and people start coming and using it. So, and they says, oh, we will never get the people in for a session. You start a training, they will never come. Why don't you just do something self-service and let people come and do it? And this is a technology organization which works day in and day out on technology, and they believe they don't need adoption, right? And they don't
Okay,
see,
interesting.
and they don't see the value in. They bought the licenses. It's not that they've not bought the licenses. They bought the license for the technology, and they have decent usage, but they don't want to invest time and effort in making sure that the technology is relevant to the work which people are doing, or making specific use cases, looking at security. Says, "Oh, we don't really care, give it to them and they will come and use this, like build it and they will come."
Why
That
exactly
kind
is
of
that?
approach.
I mean, do you have any insights later on?
It's
Like,
a
why exactly? Yeah.
Has it
it's
worked for them, or is
Mhm.
it just the approach they are taking?
it's approach they're taking. We are still
Mhm.
sort of arguing with them that this is not the right approach.
Mhm.
But that is I'm showing that this is an attitude. So it's not like
Yeah.
because AI is there and we need to jump on the bandwagon and we could put resources behind it. I'm giving the extreme example of Singapore government versus this technology company, which is also recently large number, probably has as many employees as Singapore government, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just showing you the
So,
comparison of different levels of
so
importance
let
people
me
are
let
giving.
me ask you a bit more on this, as we are about to clock 1 hour as well. A great discussion. Actually, that's how the things flows. But Deepak, for you, because you weren't able to make. So you mentioned about those, some of the organizations has all the right intent. However, some of the organizations are still grappling with the value proposition. So can you help us walk through, like, what are the key things you look for, or how exactly they are implementing, the people who are have all the right intention from the Gen AI and AI perspective? Because a lot of listeners would like to see that in all these innovations, collaboration and security, what are at least the first couple of steps every organization or every person should think to suggest? Because you cannot just see that fifth or 10th step from now, because the things are so much fluid in nature. So what is that first couple of steps you always mention, or you would like to mention, or coach people that these are the things you have to do in order to decide whether this is a right strategy or right way of implementing in your organization at this point?
So this is again because I'll talk about from the
Mhm.
perspective of what we have seen in implementing
Yeah.
Microsoft version, which is Copilot, right? So
Yeah. And you
so
don't have to be, you
yeah,
can keep the
yeah. Now,
anonymity
I'm
as
just
well.
because
Yeah.
I'm giving you from the perspective of, if you're looking at any Gen AI which
Yeah.
has access to your internal
Hmm.
resources, the first thing which I tell them is, how good is your data governance, right? How well
Absolutely.
is, yeah, from security perspective, that's the first thing they need to check. You
Yeah.
see, today, if you have uh, I and Kumaran were talking a few weeks ago around. Says people have all kinds of data on their SharePoint. Nobody knows what is there, and
Yeah.
suddenly they turn on Copilot and everything becomes visible because earlier people did not know what keywords to search. Now Copilot just brings everything out because it's a semantic search versus a keyword search, right? And
Mhm.
and that's the whole thing. So if that's my first advice to anybody looking at building a strategy is how well, if you're going to bring AI into your own environment, touching your own data, find out how well your data is governed, right?
Mhm.
Is it appropriately secured, right?
Mhm.
I'm not talking about the external network threats, this and that.
Yes.
Those are
Mhm.
all a given, right? That is part of
Mhm.
the infrastructure, right?
Mhm.
But once you bring AI inside your environment, you need to figure out how secure is the environment inside, right? How means if people could find out each other's salary and other things which are like
Yeah,
readily
yeah.
available, right?
Mhm.
Then we have a problem, right? So that is where they should start. That is my sort of advice to from security perspective.
That's great. Actually, I totally resonate because this is something which I always recommend. What is your data story, data security
Yeah.
and governance story? Because this is exactly what are some of the repercussions. And if the
And just to mention
yeah,
one thing, when we say data, it's not
mhm,
just what is sitting inside a database, right? It
exactly,
is your
yeah,
SharePoint, your emails, your Teams, right? All those things which we usually don't consider as because they're not technically database in that language, right?
yeah.
But that is also your enterprise data.
And that is a part of the risk management. Again, whatever we are discussing is not something out of the world. Everything ties together to how you think, what exactly you're trying to achieve, and who are those stakeholders and the risk management. So now I think we are towards the closing, and we just want to make sure that some of the parting thoughts about the innovation, collaboration, and security, which is obviously a theme of our conversation. So would like to maybe uh, Deepak, you have less airtime today, so I'll start with you. In order to, or anything which you always want to provide some thoughts, but you missed out because of these technical glitch. Uh, Thinking the collaboration, innovation, and security. What's your advice to someone like maybe Kumran and me are sitting here? How would you coach them? What are key things to look for so that we can evaluate from there?
I think AI has the generative AI specifically, right? So
Mhm.
now when we start talking about AI, there is all kinds of AI which is there. But now what we're talking about, because the most accessible AI today is the generative AI, thanks to ChatGPT and Copilot and clones of that, right? So though that has really brought AI closest to the common user as much as it could have. Right? It is a technology which a teacher could use, which office worker could use, a student could use, right? So it's like the range is almost infinite in that sense,
Mhm.
right? So the possibilities which have now opened up are huge. What people need to think about is how do they open up to this in a measured way and not in an uncontrolled way. That is what the secure part of it is, making sure that you don't lose out your crown jewels just because you want to adopt the new technology. You need to
Mhm.
at least apply the smell test and see whether it works with our environment or not, or the kind of business which we do, how secure it is going to be once we invite this technology inside, right? And that's something which everybody needs to think about from their perspective. And of course, collaboration. More people talk about it, more people share their opinion the way we are doing. Uh, there are possibilities, more innovations will come out of it. So we have not come across all the use cases. Every time I go to a customer and find out, they have found completely unique things of what Gen AI could possibly do, right? And they are reverse engineering their own documents to create stuff, which is sometimes like this is I could never think of it. And so I think it has opened space for people who are just looking for that. Oh, something which could help them in natural language, and that's the biggest piece which is making this technology closer to users because it uses natural language.
That's great. So yeah, it's about understanding deeper. Obviously, you have to be a thinker to understand if you are in the leadership position that why. Again, if you are still trying to grappling about why, read books. I think Simon Sinek's Power. I think Power of Why is a great way to understand why is more important and powerful to understand, and before even implementing, because we discuss about the power of question is more important than the answer, because answers everyone has. If you talk to the people of asking advice, if you ask one, you will get 100. So that's the case. It is. So Kumran, what about you? What's your parting thoughts about innovation, collaboration, and security?
I think this discussion actually made something very clear to me. If you have a worm's view, you won't go wrong in strategy and execution. And you have a worm's view, which means a clear output is defined. For example, Uber case.
Hmm.
If I can get the cab where I am standing, problem solved. You start on day one with the solution. Very clear.
Exactly.
Okay. So if you have a worm's view and that thing very clear, right? I think rest of the other things will fall into place because
Hmm.
you have a ground reality check with actual things. I think that's what is it's very counterintuitive, right? You need
Yeah.
to have a micro level detail for you to get the strategy right
Hmm.
or validate the strategy. If you don't have a micro level detail, there is nothing to test the strategy on. After 3 years, after running that strategy, then you will say, oh, wrong strategy.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
I think
Yes.
it became, yeah, okay.
So I think that's what you're saying, that if you have a worm's view and you have a clear way of thought, and sometimes obviously there are a lot of things to work. Sometimes you already have a solution. Sometimes you're still trying to understand
I mean,
the creation itself.
I'll give a
Mhm.
analogy or an example which will be very
Yes.
clear in people's head.
Hmm.
You go for a blood work test and your blood
Hmm.
sugar is at whatever,
Hmm.
76. Okay. Healthy person will have 50. Now evolve the strategy. Work, do intermittent fasting, run 50 kilometers a day, do whatever you want. But now you have a thing to measure whether your blood sugar is coming down or not.
Hmm.
So that's the bird's view I'm talking about.
Got it. Got it. That's great. That's great. I think we have a lot of things which we have discussed about. Just to quickly summarize, and if people have listened, because it's a long podcast, if you're towards the end later on, we did discuss about some of the innovation. We did discuss some of the case studies and use cases, which Kumran also mentioned. Discuss about what are some of the strategic approach you have to take. And again, always think, and this is the podcast philosophy is as well. We are not always give you solution. We are giving directions, because the solutions which are being brought up by an individual is more profound and everlasting by versus if someone else is telling them. So we discussed that. We also discussed about some of the AI impact. Deepak also provided some of the CISO's perspective, some of the use cases about where it works and where it doesn't. And also we discussed towards the end about what are some of the key takeaways and thought processes which will help you to understand, first of all, why, or if you already have a solution like in the Uber's case, then you take that as a seed and then try to kind of get into those other outcomes out there. So that being said, gentlemen, thank you so much for providing your time. This is not the first and last. Kumran is obviously a seasoned guest, and Deepak, I'll look forward to you if you would gracefully agree to my other requests as well. So that being said, thank you so much, gentlemen, and thank you so much. I love our conversation, and have a
Thank you.
blessed day ahead.
Thanks, Deepak and Saurabh. It was
Thank you
a good
guys. And
discussion.
sorry about my technical